again.
We met CS, my husband.
So have I forgot? Okay, good. That makes me feel better. Not that we haven't met, but that I just didn't forget.
And this is Kate.
Nice to meet you. Okay, so wait, are you telling me that you're spending a date night?
That is.
How many here
Yes.
rather than doing
Everything.
literally
Oh,
anything
fantastic.
else?
I know, right?
Wow, you're using your precious date night.
Happy date night.
You're like, please don't call it a date.
Yeah, no, I guess I meant like a night away from the kids.
Yes, like sitter official and
possible.
everything.
Yes, no,
So true.
I agree, this does not count as a.
Counts, it still counts.
Laura.
As long as you don't talk about the kids on the way home.
Yeah,
Or you stop
That's a good rule.
somewhere on the way home.
yeah, that's the plan. Yeah.
Get something good.
Not cold. Take out or from home. So glamorous.
Very glamorous.
Mhm.
We got Molly.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want me to sit by the computer?
No, but you know what I can do? I can just take this mouse over, which I was forgetting.
Oh,
It works. I just, my brain says, gotta have a mouse by the computer. No. Bluetooth. And Abra.
I don't know
everyone's.
if you could hear the snorting in the background, but I promise it's not me. This guy.
Oh, honey. What is that pup's name?
This is Frank.
Oh,
Yeah, he was just scratching up at me snorting, and I'm like, they can probably hear the snorting and are wondering what's going on. What's wrong with Jess? She's snorting.
you definitely named him after Frank Zappa, right?
What's that? Frank Zappa?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. When I met him, I had no idea that I was going to name him that. It just made sense. I was like, oh, he is a Frank.
Sure,
That's hilarious.
sure. That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well, let's give people a few more minutes to find the link and join on before we start. The fabulous Molly is here and will be presenting shortly and sharing all of the knowledge and wisdom with us. Probably the meaning of life will be in there too, somewhere like on page 2. I'm just guessing.
7 or what's the?
42.
42, thank you. Oh, I know this is a good crowd when you can. Yeah, most of the time I feel like everyone's like, what it? You've lost it.
You found your people.
I found my people right here. That's it, it's 42. You can stop searching.
The answer's right there. You didn't even have to get to 100.
That was the answer on the edge of a timer.
If only.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
Oh.
I was hanging out at Blockbuster Video.
Yes.
With a lot of foliage.
I mean. Oh, we
you
can't hear
unmuted, but
you.
we can't hear you. Nope.
No.
On you can hear it. House.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Let me test. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Success.
All right. Carrie.
I was just gonna say, should I go tell Carrie to?
Yeah. All right, my friends. Let us start. And if anyone else joins us later on, then we can welcome them when they come. Welcome to the Family Connections January, because that is the month we are in, so meeting.
2023.
If you would be willing to please introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns, and how you're related to Marcy, or who your
People are.
people are at Marcy. And let us start with the folks online first, because y'all can see each other a little bit easier there than us here. So Abra, would you be willing to start us off?
Sure. Hi, I am Abra Staffen-Wiebe, and my daughter Thea is a third grader at Marcy right now. And my son was also there last year, but now he's in middle school. And I'm the secretary. So if you have a name that has strange spelling and it's not online necessarily, please put it in the chat or just tell me what it is, because I have to record who attended these things. And I'll pass it to Laura.
Hi, I am Laura Messenger. I use she, her pronouns, and my son Leo is a first grader in Nicole's class. I'll pass it to Molly.
Hi, my name is Molly Dingler. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm a parent of a second grader at Emerson, and also a board member of Colectiva Bilingüe, which represents 5 dual language schools in MPS. I'll pass it to Jedri 001.
Is that, oh gosh, that's what it's coming up as. I'm Jess, Jess Driscoll, and I'm the assistant principal of Marcy. I much prefer to be there in person, but it was a busy day and a late night getting home, and so I knew I would not make it back in time. But I'm really glad I can join you online. And Molly, your earrings are fabulous. And I guess I have to pass it to, oh, Emmy. Yay, you're here. Pass it to Emmy.
Hi all. I'm
Emily,
Emmy.
we're just doing introductions and how you're connected to Marcy.
Cool. I have a first grader in Miss Brannigan's class and a little one who hopefully will do high five next year. Am I passing to anyone or did you all go?
That's perfect. My name is Claire Trowley. I am the chair. I use she, her pronouns. I have a second grader in Marcy, and hopefully a kindergartner next year. Oh, we'll see. On lots of things. And with that, I will pass.
I'm Suzanne Walzak. I have a kindergartner. Felix is in Stacy's class, and we have Laszlo in the high five class as well.
Yes, I'm the other side.
My name is Carrie Olson. I use she, her pronouns. I have a fourth grader in Chris's class and a first grader in Miss Brannigan's class.
Kate, also she, her, also have a fourth grader in Chris's class, who actually gave me a hug at school today after totally ignoring me last time I saw him in the hallway.
Chris or your kid?
My child.
Okay.
Chris did not give me a hug.
Okay.
I'm not sure Chris recognized me. We've only met on Zoom. No, my fourth grader gave me a hug. And I have a first grader in Dawn's class, and I am the current treasurer.
Fabulous. Well, without further ado, I would love to introduce Molly, who is here to speak with us this evening. Molly is an Emerson parent, as she mentioned, and Emerson has been doing some really fun and exciting and innovative things with their different, I don't want to call it it's because it's no longer a PTA, but they're different parent organizations, family organizations, community organizations, school community organizations, and just going to kind of share what they did, what worked, and potentially answer any questions people may have. Molly, please take it away.
Awesome.
fully intend this to be a back and forth, and I know that not everyone has access to the links in the chat, but I also know that some of you have seen the visuals that I'm trying to share, but I don't have access to screen sharing. Can anyone?
Well, I could change that.
Okay.
Better flat over
But
here to do
in the
that.
meantime, and this is not required, and maybe you could include it in your notes because Abra, your secretary. Okay, so I'm just giving you the full behind the curtain look at the document that I just dropped in the chat, and you don't have to look at it now. I'll show you some visuals, which is all you need for now. But those of you who have already heard some of this before can you know, keep yourselves entertained by just looking through this spreadsheet, which is where we keep all of our meeting agendas, which is like what you all are right now. You're kind of like board leaders, right? We've moved from like a traditional board structure as was dictated by the national PTA, and we're now more of like a leadership team. And so the equivalent of what I think is happening right now, we meet on the first Tuesday of the month, and then we organize ourselves to have a community meeting, which is not so much a meeting, we're calling it family empowerment conversations. And those are kind of, site council happens on the third Tuesday of the month. And then we have a community dinner, and then we go straight into the family empowerment conversations. So as part of our transformation, we've tried to take as much of the business out of the conversations and really prioritize connection and empowerment and engagement and many, many voices in that time, which used to be the PTA meeting time. So so what you the document that you see here is our like kind of operations meeting that happens on the first Tuesday of the month, and is kind of like I guess the equivalent to what you all do, maybe. And also caveat, like we don't have everything figured out. Okay, so, and what's working for us doesn't mean that it's gonna work for you, and so I'm just offering you an example of doing things differently, and maybe that will just like give you some like energy to like disrupt and that's the name of the game, right? And so fully I know that a lot of I know that a lot of the things that we're doing won't work for you, and so just like take it as a idea of one way of doing things differently and go forth and do you. So this is a sampling of a presentation that we did in a smaller group that some of you were there for. And then also our site council got a little bit of a retrospective this year as we kind of have done an intentional merge collaboration with site council as part of our process. So how do we get here? Oops, come on. Okay. So first, I just wanted to show you a couple things that we start off each meeting with. We start with a language acknowledgement. You know, like a lot of times we think of like a land acknowledgement as some people do it and it's great. Or sometimes it's a little bit lip servicey. Sometimes it's not done in full, you know, justice to the idea that it originally came. And so for us, what's really relevant is a language acknowledgement. And so starting each meeting, especially since we're in a dual language context and we're supporting all of our students to center Spanish. And in my case, my entry into leadership is really from advocacy, because my family during the pandemic moved from Dominican Republic, where we became a family, to Minneapolis. And despite our best efforts in like getting a kind of address before we had actually moved here, applying on time for the first lottery and then the second lottery, and not getting a spot at any of the 3 dual language schools, despite being like, hey, put him in kindergarten, put him in first grade. Like what was kindergarten? Let's do it again. We did not get placed. We did not get placed in any school until my husband, who went several times to the placement office and just said, like, I don't understand your system here. Like, I'm just trying to get my kid in a school where he can maintain his home language. He had actually done kindergarten in a charter school because that was better than a million different preschools, and we were just trying to figure it out. And so like we were a prime example of just trying to get our kid in the public school system, and it wasn't until the 3rd visit knocking down the door at placement where we got a letter, surprise, to Emerson, even though we're actually closer physically to Las Estrellas and they're under enrolled. And so that's when I got my first kind of like idea about how messed up the system was. And jumped right in. So with this language acknowledgement may not be relevant for you, but it helps us really always acknowledge who's in the space and always make sure that we have somebody who is a qualified interpreter, not just somebody who's like, oh yeah, I know Spanish and I can, but like a qualified interpreter is a skill, and we pay our interpreters. And we're actually using that money from the school's language line services. And that's a big change this year, because we know that while our current leadership really values that interpretation is a skill and a right and is part of an equitable meeting, we want to make sure that that conviction is not dependent on who's in leadership with FA, which is what we call ourselves, Emerson Families de Emerson, but that it's like operationalized and it's a responsibility of the school. And so now we're taking that from our school's budget. It's been tricky because it's much easier for them to pay people who are MPS employees. And sometimes our teachers are less available than like a parent interpreter. So we also offer childcare for all of our meetings, and we pay 25 the same hourly rate for interpretation as childcare. And so we do $25 an hour for both, for each job. And the childcare is done by our international teaching assistants, which is also a collaboration between the school and the parents and Colectiva. Just some basic inclusive meeting practices before we get started. We also open up with, I know that you all are still in the process of defining your mission and vision and values, and I think that's great. We still don't have like our organizational mission, vision, and values, but we decide to start each meeting with looking at the new mission and values of the dual language program, which we think we really want to lean into the fact that like the dual language schools have gotten increasingly on the same page, and there's been a history of inequity between the programs. And so leaning into these and servicing different ones that come up in the context of different times of year and different meetings. And then we have group agreements, and these actually came through a moment of navigating conflict, which was, I kind of broke this process down into 3 steps, and navigating conflict has really helped us define who we are, and is what produced these group agreements that we bring into every space. So here's our process in 3 steps. I know I don't want to talk this whole time, so I tried to distill it as much as possible. First, we defined our purpose. Who are we and why do we exist? Then we build trust through inclusive meeting practices. And then in the whole time and ongoingly navigating conflict and making good decisions. To the best of our ability. So first, when we define our purpose, it was really important when I first got involved. I came from a perspective of, I don't remember a parent organization entity when I was a kid in school in Minneapolis public schools. I went to Barton, actually. I know that some of you have a relationship with Barton. And then I went to South High. I was an open school kid, and I've done a lot of thinking about my own framework for learning and MPS, and how that no longer exists through the CDD, and how we're at a place of kind of restarting a lot of our communities because of the disruption, however it's worked out for you, that has created new communities. And so acknowledging that we need to hear from a diversity of perspectives, and that I personally am not carrying the trauma of going through that disruption. I mean, just internationally, like immigration, there's a little trauma there, but like there's a lot of things I don't know about why things are so. And I think all of our stakeholders, parents, teachers, staff, and students have a perspective that we need to hear in defining our purpose. And then also thinking about all those people who are involved, like what's their individual purpose and motivation for being involved? What's our organization's purpose and role? And is there another organization or group unit who has the same purpose, and why don't we collaborate? That's how we got the site council. And then is there a purpose that's bigger than us? Like in our case, it's thinking about the way that we're formally defined by bringing in money and spending money, and can all schools bring in money and spend money in this way? right? Can we think a bit outside of ourselves? Can we think about the world and why dual language schools need to exist, and why, you know, MPS, you know, so thinking bigger than us, but also going down to the individual level, why we're all here. And then getting distractions out of the way. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I have some visuals here. So we first started by talking with Elena Espinosa, who was, I think, the first Latina parent president or chair in anyone's history that they can remember, which is shocking given that our school's student makeup is 70% Latino. And Elena is also a Spanish only speaker and fierce advocate, like ideal profile for a leader that you want, and was really kind of put into, you know, leadership power with the help of Adriana Cerrillo, who was an Emerson parent and then went off to become our board director on the school board. And as she left the Emerson community and dedicated herself to that, you have something similar happening. She was kind of like, here, Elena, take the leadership, make sure it doesn't get taken by a white parent, please. And so Elena was like, okay, like I got it. But she was not prepared at all for that transition. And a lot of things were assumed that, you know, in terms of like, oh, a meeting has an agenda, a meeting has a beginning, a middle, and end. Here's your job description. Like there wasn't a job description, right? And so she just had to navigate being a Latina leader with the same kind of perspective that I came to this country with, which is the Dominican version of a PTA, which is nothing like what people have made it into here. In the DR, and I think in her experience as a child in Mexico, you have like class parents, right? Like a class leader. And then the parent teacher organization is basically a representative from each grade or class coming together, sharing their common joys and concerns and working it out. And that's what you do, right? And it's a combination of teachers and parents. And now there's all these other layers that, like, being part of the national PTA had this whole like website thing, this member hub, these bylaws that you had to, these voting rules, you had to pay your $6.25 and register your name in order to have rights to make a decision, and like layers upon layers of white supremacy culture embodied in an organization. And no one really even knew these things, that they're operating within this inequitable system, just that it was really hard. And so I think the first thing was like naming what needs to change, and starting by thinking of all of our stakeholders again, and that each one of them had a perspective about what needed to change, especially the perspective of a teacher. So we called ourselves a PTA, but our teacher co-chair was like, I can't support Elena. Like, I'm the only bilingual one here. Everyone else was pretty much English only speaking. And we put a lot of pressure on Maestra Veronica to be the bridge and to like be the face of the organization as a volunteer endeavor on top of everything else. You know, that teacher who's like, does it all. And so this was completely volunteer, and it wasn't fair to put equal weight on Elena and Maestra Vero to carry this organization in a way that was actually truthful and authentic to being a PTA. And so thinking about how can we meaningfully, and really like the role of Maestra Vero was to come to each meeting and be like, I'm here. Okay, I'll tell the teachers. But she wasn't like meaningfully engaged either. It was just a burden. And so by the time I was asking, because Elena, so all I did was sign up to like host a teacher appreciation potluck. There was an email that went out, and I was like, I'll do it. I want to appreciate teachers. And so I signed up like the fall of that first year that I was I was a parent, and I was like, I'll do it. Didn't know it was a potluck. I thought I was just like ordering some food or something, setting it up. It turns out it was a potluck. So I was like, oh shit, I have to like know some people. And so I ended up like putting my phone number out there to everybody. And then our parent liaison, who was inherited from Wyndham, I didn't know all this at the time. She was inherited from Wyndham. She was like, I got you. I'm going to connect you with the lady with all the spreadsheets. And the lady with all the spreadsheets had organized this event that had never happened at Emerson before, but it happened at Wyndham. And she was like, here's the sign up, genius. You got to do that 4 weeks out, then 3 weeks out, you do this, then 2 weeks out, you do this, 1 week out, 2 days out, same day. Don't work that day. It's going to take all day. And I was like, okay, wow, this is intense. I just signed up for lunch. And now I'm like, and I had no idea I was inheriting like all these ways of being and like what's normal for Wyndham and putting it on Emerson until it was the day of, and teachers were like, oh my God, like crying. And I was like, isn't this what you do like twice a year? And they're like, no, this is the first time. And I was like, that lady who gave me all the things, and they're like, must have been Wyndham lady. And so, you know, like good things can happen by cross-pollinating ideas, but it's also important that we recognize what are systems that we're inheriting from past leadership, from the CDD, from schools, you know, that we're not even conscious of. And that was my first big learning. And in that lunch, Elena, was her like donation of tamales. Oh, by the way, I was able to get a lot of people, not just people who filled up the sign up genius, who you can imagine who that is, but by putting my number out there and by speaking Spanish, the Latino parents would call and say, I'm bringing tamales. I'm like, okay, I did the sign up genius. And so that day, Elena was like, and so that day, Elena was like, oh my God, you did what I have never been able to do, which is to get actually representation of all the people and all their food here. Here, take my tamales, you be president. You got this. And I was like, oh no, I don't know what I'm doing. Let's talk. And so when we talked to her, these points are kind of what came out, that these are the things we need to change. We need more support for new leaders. We need active board members. We need best practices for including those who are not bilingual, and we need more community participation from Latino families. And all these people here are gone, except Elena. They're all like, it's not working for me, I'm out. So we started like defining positions, and we started also putting a like profile of who should have these positions, and not backing down from that profile. So we still don't have secretaries because we want one who's English dominant, one who's Spanish dominant. We actually got somebody who's like a substitute teacher and a parent who's serving the role as like school staff rep, because Katie, our school liaison, didn't survive the budget cuts post strike, so we don't have a family liaison anymore. So this is like live at the time of, so we were flexible with these positions in terms of their functions, because some of the roles are still unfilled because we're not sacrificing like that. Our two co-chairs should be one Latino and one who's bilingual, because otherwise you'll have a situation like Elena, who's isolated from her harnessing her power and being able to effectively lead so maybe the language is not as relevant for your school community, but those kinds of profile things we thought were important as space holders to make sure that we don't just put the first people who put up their hands in leadership positions, but are really intentional about how we create leadership pipelines. And then I also have the privilege of doing this for my real job, my work. And so I did a little bit of research on like, what is caregiver engagement? And has somebody already like thought about the fact that it's not all like what the PTA says it is, right? There's more ways of doing this, right? And so there's actually 4, like Epstein, who's really well known, and Montemayor, who's a little newer. They define 4 different models of caregiver engagement. And so you see like number 1 here, volunteer labor fundraising is in a typical, that's what is like most people's default and what most people just go on auto drive and start doing. And then the school sometimes approaches it through number 2, and it's like, oh, the school wants to teach parents how to engage kids and continue the learning at home. And sometimes that's approached from, especially it's more common in schools of global majority students, where the school is kind of approaching it from a deficit perspective. Like, let's teach you how to teach students who are falling behind at home, right? It can be different, and many Latino parents are actually asking for more of that, but it's the content is coming from our families now, as opposed from the school saying, I know what you need, right? 3 would be self-improvement, community building. So a lot of parents are like, I just wanted to meet other parents. And the first PTA meeting that I went to, I like almost crashed my bike on my way there, and I came and I was like, did I miss something? Because there weren't even introductions. And so I can already tell from the vibe in your group that like you have become bonded to each other. But think about too the perception of that to somebody from the outside who's joining. That bonding can also be, you know, work against you if it gets too intense. And so, but a lot of parents are looking for that. And in my first meeting, I left being like, I didn't meet anybody, and I don't know if I belong here. And then 4 is really what we landed on as our goal. And so meaningful caregiver empowerment and collaboration in school decision-making. We want to be able to impact our students' learning experience. And this is actually the stated purpose of Site Council. So as we kind of like dissolved our PTA and we're like, burn the thing down, instead of rushing to become a, going backwards. Instead of rushing to become a new organization, this is our process for, we had to, let me just finish that thought. Instead of rushing to become a new organization, we had to think like, does something with our intended purpose already exist? And how can we make that more functional? Because the reality is a lot of site councils are just really dysfunctional, but all the bylaws and the way it's written and the idea that like teachers actually get stipends to be on site council and they show up and that like a school leadership can do targeted recruitment to make an explicitly like diverse representative site council is a good grounding, is a good like idea. We just have to figure out how to like make it work better. And so let's invest our efforts in making something that already has a good idea and founding happen before we go off and like hyperactive parents like try to do better on our own. And so when we had to dissolve you don't have to learn too much about dissolving your PTA because luckily you're not even a PTA, so we'll just skip that one. Don't become a PTA. So we did this like radical slowdown. When we dissolved our PTA status, it was kind of scary for some people, especially the treasurer, because they're like, we own your bank account. You need to give all that money back or find a place to transfer it or spend it. And so what most organizations do is they set up their own 501c3 and they become a PTO and they transfer it. And so we just were like, hold on, if we transfer all our money from PTA to PTO, like what's the difference? The problem is we still have like inherited an unfair head start against like compared to all the other schools in Colectiva. There is an organization, dysfunctional, very, called Colectiva Bilingüe, that was founded with all the extra inherited money from the super Wyndham PTO, which had like 40,000 extra dollars when they stopped being, not 40,000, 25, sorry. $25,000 extra from when they stopped being a dual language school that was used to be a startup seed money for Colectiva Bilingüe. Let's see if just in the same way that we try to make site council more effective, if we can really like leverage this idea of shared resources and putting our heads together to do it better and become fiscally sponsored, house our money earmarked under Colectiva, because that will allow us to ask ourselves every time money comes in, could all the schools generate money in this way? And when we spend the money with oversight from board members from all 5 schools, could all the schools spend money in this way? And if the answer is no, then we share that money. If the answer is yes, then we say, okay, this is something that we can do and they can do it too. And we can share resources to do it better and easier together. So one example of that is we have this like super centrally located downtown parking lot. Okay, so for Pride and Holodazzle, don't tell the district, Jedry, what Jess, but we have like this Google Doc, and any volunteer, actually students from middle school and high school students with their parent friends, can sign up to work a shift in the parking lot, charging other cars for, the privilege of having ideal Pride and Holodazzle parking. And then we divide the total amount earned by the number of slots each school worked. And so it's still not even, right? Equity is not always like completely even, but I can tell you for holidazzle, Emerson did not get the most. And the last time we did holidazzle, we couldn't even staff all the hours because you freeze your ass off and you don't want to be out there for that long, right? And so by collaborating, we have these we do 2 people at a time, so you end up working a shift with somebody from another school and like chatting it up, and we're building community, right? And also providing a community service of a parking lot without relying on the backs of our parents. So that's one example of like thinking collectively and how we raise money and spend money together. And so we created a financial philosophy. I don't know if you can see all these words, but basically it's not resource hoarding as our philosophy. And I can share these documents with you if it's too fast. And so the bottom line is that we know that all families want their children to get a good education. So how do we get them to come together as a community, realize that they have a common vision and goal and what each can do? Because everybody, even if you're not contributing financially, even if you have to work during the day, there is a way for everyone to support. So in order to figure out the answer to that, we had to build trust through inclusive practices. So you saw some of our group norms. We are expanding the definition of leadership. So if you're looking at that Excel sheet, you might see our organization breakdown that's called calendar by committees. And so in order to expand leadership beyond just those like board positions, we now have 8 different working groups that have title. Well, the most impactful one has been class captains. And so we have a group called class captains, and that's where all the captains of all different grades come together and like strategize for how they can like either disseminate information or build community within a grade level. And usually we have a person who prefers Spanish and a person who prefers English as a team in those groups. And they help make sure all the like messages are translated, and we use WhatsApp. We use a lot of WhatsApp. So each one of these committees is a WhatsApp group. That's one of the things that's working really well for us because it centers a communication practice that's more easy and prevalent to navigate for the Latino community than for the non-Latino community because of the international communication scene. I don't know if it would work the same way for your community, but expanding leadership through WhatsApp and not having people come to an actual meeting, but like chatting it up and working towards an actual goal, whether it be class leadership. We have one about finances, so everyone can really be transparent in our financial decisions. We have one about play dates, just like getting the kids together. A lot of that happens too in the class stuff. We have sadness in my house. Anyway, you can see on that spreadsheet all the different committees. And Comida and Comunidad is a really big one. We have one that's only a Spanish language group. And so there's anytime we need food, that's a Spanish only, everyone's invited in it, but it's kind of like a safe space to not have to translate your messages and have more fluid dialogue around using food to promote community. And we do a lot of that. A lot of potlucks, a lot of just food is prevalent in everything. And that's primarily organized by Latino parents. Targeted recruitment, so both in the site council and for these captain positions, being like, you are really good at Comida, you should be the captain of Comida. And someday I think the captain of Comida is gonna, be our treasurer, be our secretary, be our president, because somebody saw it in them and said, you are a leader. And that's really the biggest gap for a lot of people and who haven't had leadership positions before, is just somebody saying, you are a leader, you're already doing it. Let's do it some more. and we have a board leadership cycle that has like a 6-month, like right now we're naming our leaders for next year, so that there's like a 6-month shadowing process. And then next year I will shadow that person for 6 months before I phase out. So I'm trying to work myself out of a job here. And in our January on Tuesday, those people are going to put their hands up because we've already been kind of cultivating that leadership identity. Open board meetings. So I know that anyone could walk into your meeting. This is a community meeting for you all, but sometimes when you say board, it feels really exclusive. So we also have those meetings on the first Tuesday online. And this is a huge win. In January, we had 21 people attend, including 3 fifth graders who brought their parents because they're student representatives and they're like killing it with the popcorn machine. That's their main job. They bring the popcorn machine to events and pop popcorn. They do more than that. They also give a lot of their perspective and make meetings a very, very joyful space. But yeah, a lot more people are coming to open leadership meetings, which is just testament to like more people are seeing themselves as leaders. And then in our community meetings, we get, depending on like the level of the party, our last one was a big party. It was probably over 100 people. And it was during our conversations time, but it was a party. So, and in order to enter for the raffle, you had to make a leadership commitment and write your phone number. So it was like, in 2023, you write your commitment and then contact, and that was your ticket for this raffle, and people donated prizes. So it's called chantaje in Spanish, like blackmail. Whatever it takes. And then transparent and shared decision making. So I'm a big fan. I'm a teacher coach, and I'm a big fan of Elena Aguilar. I don't know if any of you know Elena Aguilar. Oh, yes. Okay. So Elena Aguilar has a lot on decision making processes and just having an agenda. So it's really clear when you're making a decision. Expanding the idea of like, there's a lot of different ways to make decisions and having the right people in the room when you make decisions. So we've really leaned into that. And luckily, some of you have seen all these things before, but this is just looking at community assets and a lot of chances to see yourselves in leadership and think about yourself as a person with strengths to contribute. This is our WhatsApp, like, okay, here on the right, you can see all of our different committees. We have one for advocacy, play dates, academic support, festivals, class captains, comida, comunidad, but you know. And then this is just a screenshot from our Spanish only group. Like there's a lot more sharing of videos and hearts and emojis and voice notes. Other groups are a lot more writing text. And then, like I said, like inclusive meetings doesn't just mean having an interpreter. It means sometimes you have to just have a group where it's free flowing in one language or by interest. In this group, it was supposed to be a world cafe, you know, where people rotate, and all the Latinos just got to Anthony, he's my husband, got to Anthony Station and just stayed there for the whole time because they're like, we like how this guy communicates. It wasn't that they were super into learning about the TA program, I don't think. I think it was because Anthony was facilitating and it was a very culturally responsive meeting format, and they just didn't want to rotate after they got there. And so like paying attention to that and be like, okay, maybe that's should be how we do conversations sometimes, is just stick with your language group and attack that goal in a way that works best for you, which is not the same between different cultures. I know schools actually, Washburn, they have an entirely different, Washburn High School. That principal just has like her Somali parent group, her Latino parent group, and her white parent group, and all of them have different purposes and different ways of being and different reasons for being involved, and she just keeps them separate. And like that's an idea too, you know. So and so I think you all got the idea about the translation thing. I saw your agenda. The big reason why we do it in the spreadsheet like this, and this is a site council agenda from Ella Baker where they have Somali, Spanish, and English, is because while you're in the meeting, you can be taking notes. And if the translation or the interpretation doesn't come quickly enough, you can actually get like a transcription in live time. And so when we try to prefer Spanish to center Spanish, and so for the English speakers, they can follow along in writing and not get like a perfect translation if things get really excited. But yeah, also sometimes we get headsets from Davis and we put those on the English speakers. And so it's just Spanish and they're like, yes, I can hear it in my head. So sorry. Okay. Last one is navigate conflict and make good decisions. We have a school leadership that's like leaning in to the idea of healthy conflict, although I would say we're working on that. It's a constant struggle to like embrace when parents are like, what are they doing? And so our principal gets a lot of complaints about me and I'm like, just tell him to talk to me. And so he tries to divert them, but sometimes he calls me like real nervous and he's like, people are upset. And I'm like, yeah, I know, we're changing. Is that okay with you still? And he's like, yeah, okay, just making sure. And so, but we've had a lot of chances to practice. Some of you may have been witnesses to our uniforms decision-making process. And we've had a lot of opportunities to do reflection and feedback on our process. Obviously the strike was also a great opportunity to like lean into being comfortable with discomfort, thinking about when we came back from that, our school administration really delayed for a long time and like bringing everyone back together on their normal Wednesday staff meetings, and actually asked me as a parent to facilitate that first meeting coming back. And we did this core values word cloud. Everyone, all the teachers identified their core values, and the way that we got our name for family was because both the staff and the parent version of this exercise had family in the center. And so what does it look like if we live out that that value and how we relate to each other? And then we dove right in to this uniforms debate, and were able to, you know, I didn't have a positionality in it, but I did recognize that this is not a debate about uniforms or no uniforms. It's about culture clash happening, because there's some people, and I'm not just saying like white people, but there's some people who are much more individualistic. And what a lot of more recent immigrants from Latin American countries were feeling and wanting uniforms. One is like not feeling that family, not feeling that unity, and searching like the root need was unity, and the root need was collective spirit. And so finding something that can bond us and thinking about something bigger than ourselves, right? And this was like the easiest thing to grasp. And the hardest thing for a lot of people to understand was how can we really represent the voice of everyone when the loudest voice was not necessarily representing the majority. So we ended up reaching 92% of families, 79% of teachers, even though they were like right there in school every day. But this, you know, this was our result. Only, you know, the margin was 55% were for uniforms. But if you look at like the breakdown by the language that people use to vote, you can see that if our school commitment is to centering Spanish speakers, then we should pay attention to that. So naming that in our purpose was really important. And so the centering of Latino voice is something that we name quite often and think about. Yeah. Levels of empowerment is also super important. I'd encourage you to think about when you're liaisoning between yourselves and the site council and your school administration, what level decision is this, and using these levels or some kind of common frame of reference to think about who's really making the decision here. Are we informing or are we deciding? And yeah, how even though we're noble volunteers, like it's sometimes dangerous to have all of the decision resting on a group of parents who are disconnected from the day in, day out in the school. If your mission is to support student learning, it's really important that you think about who's best positioned to inform that decision and how can we support. So we're committing to the process of continuous learning and reflection. These are our like 5th grade student representatives. They sold popcorn on election day. And like I said, I'd love to hear your questions, and it's going to be ongoing. I'm sorry I talked way too long, but that's all I have for today. Do you have any questions, or do you want to save them for a later time? Because I'm sorry, I'm looking at the time now. And
We so appreciate you coming, but I want to make sure that we have time for questions for anybody who has questions, but I just wanted to make sure that I got a thank you in there before.
One question I had, in as much as kind of participation is one marker of success of this transition, you mentioned some numbers about how many people came to recent activities. What did that look like before this transition, and how did you find those people to engage them?
Yeah, site council meetings, because my husband's been on it for a while. I've tried to separate. It was about 4 people, the principal, the assistant principal, and 2 parents. Was pretty standard. And now that we don't do business outside of site council, a lot more people have been interested in being part of site council, and it's still a work in progress, but we identify so right now our co-chair for site council came because we did a kindergarten coffee and donuts at drop off on the first day of kindergarten. And I was just there, handing out Kleenexes and coffee and donuts. And this one mom was just like, you can tell when you have an electric personality. And this mom and I just started talking. I was like, girl, you got to get involved. And I was like, Jim, get her. And so she hasn't, I don't feel like the need to own all the active parents at all. She's not involved in FA really, but she's the co-chair because she is a parent who has a voice, should have a voice, and so we were just like, come. You just tell people, come, you're on site council, and they come. It really feels good to be called out by name and right there in the moment be like, you are not leaving here without a commitment. So yeah, targeted recruiting. And then for the community things, we make sure when you have a big party, we send out a printed flyer, and as well as all the digital modes of communication. And then WhatsApp is huge. We have almost 300 people in our WhatsApp group.
Nice.
Follow-up question. How did you decide to use WhatsApp, or has that just been something you've been using all along? Did you ask people what they were using, or?
Yeah, well, lived experience, we came from the DR, and we know that nobody has texting or hardly even calling with phone minutes in many Latin American countries. It's, if you have an internet connection, you have WhatsApp, and that's how you call and relate to people. And so within a lot of my Latino parent friends at school, we were already communicating on WhatsApp, and the group just started getting bigger and bigger. and so a lot of the parents who are from the US were like, what is this thing? I have to download it? And we're like, yeah, and you don't have to. You could get news other way. There has been attention because some people feel that there's more information coming out on WhatsApp now than from the school, and so we've some people might criticize and say we're being a band-aid for the fact that we no longer have a family liaison position, because we're effectively communicating more so than the school and those antiquated systems that don't work for everyone. But it's pretty parent powered, so it's communally sourced.
Is Emerson similar to us in that you draw from a geographic, large area, and how is that figured into how you engage families?
Yeah, that's why, we have only those 2 meetings, one on Zoom and one in person a month, but a lot of the organizing happens over WhatsApp because getting places is hard. And also for families in the process of getting documented, many families don't have cars or driver's licenses.
So that just kind of happens organically. It's not like there's a meeting on WhatsApp. It's just that those conversations are ongoing.
Yeah, just chatting. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I wasn't clear when you restructured from being a PTA. Are you currently a nonprofit still?
We don't have our own identity. We're fiscally housed under the 501c3 status of Colectiva Bilingüe. So they are in terms of liability and legally and financially responsible for us. And we hope that it's kind of creating the path that the other 4 schools will fall into. Unfortunately, the ones that have PTOs were already their own entities, and those were inherited from their respective schools like Green and Sheridan, now Las Estrellas, even from when they were not dual language schools. So we do a lot of communicating, but in terms of financially, they're separate from Colectiva now.
Molly, would you say that that you all like made some of these changes in concert with relationship building at the same time, or do you feel like you put in a lot of effort to relationship building first before making some of these changes?
Yeah, it was kind of in concert, but sometimes we had timelines for when things would happen. And then we were like, relationships are not there yet. Like, we wanted to name the next year's leadership in December. And we're like, nope, we're not there yet. Like, every month really is like a reflect and adapt. Even, you know, I think the strike, like our biggest meeting last year was the one right before the strike. And that process of like being connected without the school was a big fast forward for us.
Yeah. I think Lily's in first grade, so this is just our second year, but this group hosted a fabulous event was that November? But in those 2 years, that's the only event that has happened at the school. And so I think that if we as a group too can be thinking about ways for families to engage with each other, because I think that's been a big piece that's been missing. I mean, for COVID reasons, of course, you know, for a while, but just those ways to like informally connect with each other. I'd love for us to think about avenues to do that, to kind of like set the stage for relationship building and then moving forward.
Speaking of, Emmy, I have something after we're done talking with Molly. I got an email from Aaliyah, our family community liaison, who had been talking with Mike Spendy, the gym teacher, and they had an idea and I was going to share it here. So cool. That goes exactly with what you were saying.
We've also totally, like in all transparency, we've also totally been burned by the fact that like we have this critical mass in WhatsApp, and it's not a school sanctioned group. And so we did have some real friction where teachers engaged in a way that they were held accountable as if it were a school sanctioned outlet. And so that's one of the things where like right now we don't have a lot of teacher engagement on WhatsApp because unfortunately like there were some consequences because of the huge critical mass that we have on WhatsApp and a little bit of confusion around like who's running this ship.
Hey, I'm not seeing or hearing or sensing or feeling any more questions. But I'd really like to thank you for your time and your knowledge and your expertise, Molly. We so appreciate you coming and sharing what you did and how you did it and what you learned. That's just so valuable as we're kind of figuring out our new identity as an arts magnet citywide program.
Okay, so yeah, definitely use my phone number. Also, if you call the FA number, they told me that they're gonna shut down this Google Voice number if I don't get more phone calls. So feel free to use that number to call me anytime.
Okay, well, I'll just set up like a regular phone call. Maybe once a week, I'll just be like, oh, time to call Molly on her Google Voice.
Okay, cool. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Molly.
Bye. Oops, sorry. Okay, bye.
So to go off what I was kind of hinting at earlier, I just got an email this afternoon from Aaliyah So this is still very much in the like, just like an idea that has come up, no planning, no anything concrete yet. But Aaliyah was talking with Mike Spendy, who's the gym teacher. And the two of them were thinking, hey, how much fun would it be to have a family gym night? Where like families can come to the gym and like, I don't know, do gym activities or something, yes. Yes. And so, still kind of figuring out when that might be, where would presumably be the gym, but, kind of figuring out some of those details, with what the two of them were kind of thinking about. I think they just sent the email like, hey, would this be something Family Connections would be interested in? So that's something that I think could be a really great and organic way to bring people together. I had also thought maybe potentially, because Aaliyah was thinking like maybe kind of beginning of February-ish in doing it. And I had brought up, not as like a for sure thing, but just an idea. Our Family Connections meeting in February is like February 10th or something. 9th. Thank you.
Wow.
And we had originally thought, oh, let's bring in like middle school parents and they can talk, but that's right after the deadline for schools. And so instead of having kind of this type of meeting here, if we just made that Thursday night the gym night, and if anyone had Family Connections questions, we could certainly talk about that and do that, but the focus would be more like the gym night rather than this meeting. And it wouldn't necessarily be at 7 o'clock either, you know, maybe it'd be right after school. I don't know. That's for others to think about, but that was just a thought that I had.
I like that.
It sounds like it would be a good play date opportunity.
Yes.
So do we want it to be whole school or do we want it to be like by grade or something like that? You know, to encourage more of a community bonding within grade levels or something.
I feel like this is that Mike Spendy, the gym teacher, should be a part of that conversation, but that's an excellent idea. Maybe there's like a, you know, pre-K through grade 2 at this time and 3 through 5 at this time or something. I don't know. But I will bring that idea to Mike and Aaliyah's attention.
I'm
So
just
that's
going to say right now, I was very jealous. I don't know if the rest of you looked at the spreadsheet she shared with like how they had the like festivals and the family events and like the boards and everything all laid out. I was terribly jealous of that. There was so much
Of the
information.
organizational piece or the number of events?
Yes.
Gotcha. I was thinking, too, it might be nice to have, well, I could see separated by age, although a lot of families have you know, like if you have a kindergarten and a 4th grader. So maybe we could do
Siblings welcome, you know.
yeah, and or have, you know, the gym night happening and have something happening in the cafeteria and, you know, like have 3 different kind of stations or rooms that people could go to. So it doesn't get too crowded in the gym either.
Well, and Aaliyah did mention, hey, maybe there's something we can do with other centers, teachers too, but not necessarily at this event. Like at a different event, we could have the like, do music with Mike or dance with Christy or theater with Molly. Molly is the new theater teacher. My 2nd grader has her right now and is thrilled.
Oh, good.
But yes, Emmy, that was another thing that Aaliyah brought up as like a next event type thing.
I like that too, as I was listening to what Molly was talking about. I was thinking it's so nice in some ways, even though the language and the culture is a challenge. It's also really nice to have an organizing principle. And in as much as we have one, ours is arts. And I love that idea of having that be the thing around which like Family Connections is organized. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I think a lot of like, I keep thinking, how do we get more people? Because like you said, the school, the community is spread out all over the city, and so there are little communities, you know, like Kate and I are neighbors, and so we have our little community, but it doesn't necessarily, there's no carryover. And so I think having those kind of events, then we would have more of an opportunity to meet other parents, because my kids ride the bus. I don't ever see any other parents except for my friend Laura that I see at the bus stop. And like, that's it for parent overlap. And so I think having those kind of events would be nice to hopefully get more parents in and then build more of a relationship and more connections with them.
And all parents did specifically choose to send their child to an arts magnet.
Right.
So that is something we all have in common that we can build on by focusing on the arts piece, maybe a little bit more sometimes.
The other thing, oh, sorry, Abra, go
No,
ahead.
it's just like planning, for example, group theater outings or something like that. Like, I don't know about the rest of you, I got a little flyer saying that different students are eligible for free theater tickets through a thing. And so
I did not know that.
I also don't get flyers.
The other thing that Molly mentioned as a possible kind of way to connect when I talked with her earlier was conferences in February. If maybe we did something at least for the families who are coming in person for conferences as opposed to virtual, but for those coming in person, potentially we could, I don't know, welcome them to the building.
I love that idea. I think that would be awesome. Yeah, because I was thinking the gym piece could be a great recruiting and kind of like Emmy was saying too, with time to start building those relationships with various families. But yeah, conferences would be such a great time. And we can certainly set something up in that main hallway. I know that last time was an opportunity that Hannah took to Hannah and Emmett's to recruit for the after school. But why not? I mean, it's a perfect opportunity to meet families as they're coming in the door and recruit them to even just join us and see what it's like, either Family Connections or Site Council. But yeah, that would be awesome.
I propose a raffle. Let's bribe
I
them.
was gonna say, I love her.
Yeah.
Blackmail idea. I'm like, look, we have a plate of cookies, and if you write down your phone number, you get a cookie.
And email, and it has to be legible.
Well, right, exactly. But like, I feel like in the past we've done like a sign up sheet.
Yeah.
But who the hell wants to, like,
Yeah.
oh, thank you. But if I get a treat out of it, or I get my name in a raffle,
Yeah.
lovely.
The class captains, great idea too.
Yeah.
Right? That was really
Yeah.
like a built-in 20 people that just.
So like maybe, well, I mean, if we have a way to contact people, then we can figure out who's in a classroom and figure out how to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're
Yeah,
kidding.
Maybe like a whiteboard with, what's the best way, what is the best way to contact me? Put a little sticky or a Post-it or something on the best way, and like text message, WhatsApp, email, to give us Facebook, to give us some idea of where we can reach our people.
Great idea.
And I
Okay.
think thinking about what Molly said too, like, I'm not sure how to go about this exactly, but it's like, we want a group that's representative of our school, right? But like, we also have to walk this balance of like, well, we don't want to just recruit people to join us primarily white group, right? Like, how do we build something together versus just, because folks aren't going to want to, like, I wouldn't want to show up at a meeting where everything was like set already, right? Or I felt like I was the outsider. And maybe this is kind of something to think about, like for next school year, about how we kind of build, I don't have the answers, just the questions. Like, how do we build something together versus like, oh, come join us,
Yep,
It's
I
really- it's
had
on
a
my mind.
yeah, I had a conversation with Susanna, our bilingual program assistant, and she was talking about the Spanish speaking families, especially newcomers, really want to be involved, but are very intimidated about, coming into a group that's established. And so we were just kind of brainstorming about having that potential, like completely separate group for them to start getting comfortable with being engaged and in community in the school or virtually with one another, and to have that space where they're being able to share their voice and be heard, and then grow towards bridging that, but that creating a space where they feel welcomed by maybe limiting it to a Spanish language group at that point for to start, I think is a really great opportunity to start engaging different families aside from white families. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Like to have we could have like a Somali affinity group,
Yep.
or
Yeah.
and then do some work, or some connections within those groups,
Yeah.
and some intergroup. But yeah,
Yep.
that's a good idea.
I love this conversation and I really don't want to cut it short, but I also want to recognize that Rain is waiting for us to finish up so that the school engineer, so that they can go about their work, and I don't want to kind of overextend our welcome and become stinky guests. So yes, please.
Just really quickly then, because we had discussed some of this at the past meeting about the possibility of special events for upcoming months. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because Black History Month is next month. So if we want to do something for that, we need to plan it before then. And I did put out some feelers, and I have various people who are interested in different various performers of sorts who were interested in maybe doing something for the school. And I can, I don't know, put a document together or something. We don't have to discuss that right now. And then we're not all for Black History Month. Like one is for, I don't know if you know, Women's History Month, which I didn't realize when this was, but Women's History Month is also the same month, I believe. Yes, no,
March.
so, and I've got somebody who does like historical Prohibition era music and discussions interested in maybe doing something for the school in March. So there's all these things coming up, but specifically Black History Month, we want to have somebody from the outside in doing some kind of event. We probably need to figure that out in the next, well, definitely the next couple of weeks.
Maybe a subcommittee,
Yes.
that's gonna work well when we were getting the tall pal thing going, even though it was a small number of us. It was just a way to kind of like a work group to get that ball rolling and plan in place.
Sounds like you're nominating yourself, Abra, to
Well,
or
who
should I
else?
call and tell you to be the lead person on that?
Eek. Well, it can't be a group if there's only one of me. That's all I'm going to say to that. So who else wants to discourse, or should I just put some stuff together and ask some questions and send some emails to you guys? Okay.
That sounds fabulous.
I mean, could it be held together with a gym night? I mean, if we're already bringing families to school potentially and wanting various things happening, it could be like 2 activities. I don't know.
Let's explore all options, but not right this second.
Yep.
Thank you. Cool. Okay.
All right, any last burning anything? Okay, thank you
Thank you.
all.
Oh,
Thanks.
is somebody moving to adjourn? What is happening here?
Oh.
Official adjournment
Yes, I motion to adjourn.
A second.
Yes.
at
Thanks,
8:15, duly noted.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye all.